How would you describe yourself and what you offer?
Well, I would really say I'm an integrationist and a bridger. And I think what I have come to really value about my journey is that I just started at the very kind of beginning of where we get locked out of our authentic self. And I remember when I was 21 and I came home from college and I just studied Abraham Maslow. My mom and I were having coffee and she said, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, I just want to be self-actualized.
What? How old were you?
Oh, probably 20, 21.
Wow,
Yeah.
you were a well-studied, kind of compelled
I was.
21-year-old.
I mean, I knew very early that I wanted to be in this type of work.
And how did that come to you?
You know, it didn't come to me. I just knew it. I think, I was the type that if we'd be driving from one place to another and we'd hit a bird, I'd force Mom to stop so I could go get the bird and bury it right on the road. It's like I've always been kind of that kind of caretaker, as well as caregiver. And then I got in early with working with teenagers, and so even though I have all these degrees behind me, my real training came from working with teenagers, because they force you into authenticity or they cream you. It's like they don't put up with any lack of authenticity. They call you on it.
Really? So let's say that you there was something in your demeanor that they called out, that they thought that's not authentic?
Yes. I mean, if you were the least bit shy, or if you're the least bit intimidated by them, or you were, gaming them, if you were saying something, it's like they'd just shine you on. It's like you had no power over them. And I was a counselor and then the social worker. And I really learned how to set very compassionate limits, but to be very firm.
So they were teaching you as you were helping them?
Yes. They taught me how to be authentic, and they taught me a lot about integrity. And it was there that I was already a marriage and family therapist, but it was there that I decided to go back to school and get my license in addictions. And I swear to God, in some lifetime I was an addict, even though this lifetime I've never activated the disease. I used to say to this friend, I just wish I were, because you've got such a support system. It's like I've worked with addiction since 1985. There's no group of people on the planet that I respect more.
So was that something that brought you to inner child work?
Well, inner child work came pretty early on. It very, very quickly, when I was working with addictions, I realized that addictions had to do with grief. So I began to see very early how the stress and the wounds from childhood and the inability to process tension got acted out in compulsivity, and then ultimately became, addictions.
You were one of the first people to talk about the inner child.
Right,
You
I was
have
one
an
of the 5 authors that popularized that.
Yeah, one of the extremely popular books, the Inner Child Workbook. And you've moved on and you've done EFT and all of the inner child work, and then you've got a total of 8 books.
I have a total of 8, yes.
So can you give me a thumbnail sketch of that trajectory that's led you to today?
Absolutely. Well, the first book that I wrote was Life Beyond Confusion and Fear, and that was the stages. And basically, to tell you the truth, everything's come from that. I was at a place in my life where I could kind of become a vagabond. So I ended a relationship and some other things had shifted. And so I sold everything, moved out of my home in San Rafael, California, and bought an RV, and my dog named Max and I hit the road in 1993. But through that experience, the only thing I asked Spirit was, I don't ever want to worry about money, and I want Max and I to be safe. And 6 months into it, I found out that Max had a cancerous tumor. And so I was going through all this betrayal of God, by this, you've got me out here, I don't even have a phone. It was before cell phones, really. I mean, I had one of those that it cost like $15 a minute or something, And I was heartbroken about Max, but the contrast, the dichotomy was that I was having to show up for kind of the highlight of my career to that point. So the contrast to that was, boy, transforming.
Yeah.
You know, and Max made it through, like I said. And so then the next book was Maximized. And what it was called Maximized after him, but the theory is that you maximized every experience, and that's what I did. You know, I uncovered every leaf of grief, and because I was also showing up for work, the one thing about doing this work is to be authentic, you have to be real. So I couldn't be in denial about my grief about Max and be in integrity teaching it, but I also couldn't use my groups to process my grief with Max.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So I really had to learn how to be present with very deep emotions and how to navigate through that. And that prepared me for the next book, which was Which Lifetime Is This Anyway? That was a book where another highlight of my career was I was associated with the Betty Ford Clinic, and one of the women there was sponsoring a conference. And so it was 5 years after my father had passed, and I was down there and I was the keynote speaker. Well, the night before I'm going to give the speech, I get this visitation from my father. And basically he comes and tells me that we have to heal this lifetime because his soul can't continue until we do that. So that took me down a whole rabbit hole, again, where it took me into multidimensional bleed-throughs and how important it is to really see what the context of our pain is. And that's when I realized that no matter what we feel, there's a context for it. I don't care how much we think we're overreacting or how out of character it is. If we just stop and ask the question, who inside is feeling this? It'll take us back to the inner child, and then it'll take us back to the first experience of that. So that book kind of led me into the energy therapies. And it also led me into Akashic Records.
Okay, so maybe this will help me figure out a little bit more of who you are. Who is it who comes to see you, and what do you do for them?
The type of client?
Yeah.
Well, now, the person that comes to me now is someone where they're interested in spirituality.
Yeah.
They know their childhood's keeping them back. They have dealt with some sort of addictive behavior or are still dealing with it. And they want some way to get out of it. And they'll go to my website, and it's like, you know, I see you do inner child work, but you do EFT, and you also do Akashic Records.
Yeah.
It's like,
well,
at
see,
this
I only
point,
thought you did EFT. I had always seen an advertisement for you, and I associated with EFT.
Yeah.
You are so much more than that.
Yeah, yeah. That's the beauty of being 70, which now I'm 72. But the beauty of that is that I get to look back now, and we were talking about this earlier, how the magical journey that my soul has taken me to. You know, okay, now you're going to do this, now you're going to do this, now you're going to add this. And it's like there's always something more that I can expand.
Yeah.
You know, and but the four components are it's always kind of looking at how people deal with their stress, where the stress came from, which is childhood, and then opening the records, which the Akashic Records is the record of the soul. And so that gives me the context. And one of my favorite questions is, in the infinite wisdom of your soul, what was your soul wanting you to learn? Sometimes we'll get to, in the infinite wisdom of your soul, what in the hell were you thinking about? You know, it's like, how could you charted this?
Yes.
And when I say that in a session, the client just cracks up because they
Yeah.
felt that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Like,
And-
why would I have chosen to go through
you know?
this?
And so then I have to help them negotiate between their soul and their personality. So I think the crux of my work is I'm always looking at the relationship. I'm always looking at where are you and where do you want to go? Who's in dissonance and who can lead that part of you out of the dissonance. And so that's why I call my tapping interactive tapping.
Interactive because
It's always the interaction between the saboteur, the part of you that's scared, and the part of you that's expanding.
I did not get that, but
Yeah,
that is good.
yeah.
I like that.
The more light we bring in, the more we illuminate the shadow.
Yeah.
And so, you know, people do all this meditation. I remember I used to do that. I'd meditate for a half an hour and I'd feel just buzzing, you know, and then I'd go out to Safeway and somebody'd, you know, trip me up and I'd just, you know, or I'd be on the freeway and somebody'd cut me off and I'd be flipping them off.
Yeah.
How can I go from that to this, and it's because we've got those two parts. And so I'm always kind of toggling between the fragmented part of us that's scared and the part of us that's reaching for the divine, and how to bring more and more of that part of us into the light.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where the world is right now.
It is where the world is at.
I do want to make sure that we get to your latest book and
Right.
what you are doing now with your brother. And the title of the book is
I Think I Like You Better Dead.
I Think I Like You Better Dead.
Said very affectionately.
Okay. So tell me
Well,
about this new incarnation in your life.
Well, that's kind of the epitome of everything, because John and I grew up together. We went through a family crisis together, which bonded us. And then I went on one trajectory with that experience where I went really deep into, exploring it and opening up. And John went in the opposite direction, where he just learned, he tried to move away from it. He tried to get beyond. Our father's nervous breakdown is what happened. And I wanted to go into it, and that's part of why I'm a therapist. But John tried to avoid it. And so the more I got into that exploration, the more John kind of pulled away from me. And ultimately there was a 20-year or 10-year relationship, really, where we barely talked. And
It made him uncomfortable to think that you might be discovering things that he wanted to keep hidden.
Oh, yeah. But I get that a lot, in my life. It's like, people will get close to me when they're in pain, because it's nice to, they can talk to me about anything. But then they sometimes have to distance from me because they don't want to live there. Like, that's what I said about John in the book. He visited my world at different times, but he didn't want to live there until he died. And what we're getting into now is the whole book, I Think I Like You Better Dead, really details our history, which was very painful for me to watch. I didn't want to watch. Write. But in order to write it, you have to relive it. What humanity is getting to, and this is why it's so cool to be alive at this point in time, is we've really gotten to a point where we have the capacity. There's enough light on the planet now, and there's enough of light workers to help all of us shift, that we can expand to a level of consciousness that merges. So now there is a body-spirit continuum. So it's not like this demarcation where as humans it's like, okay, you die and you're in the non-physical. You're alive and you're in the physical.
Yeah.
Well, because we're multidimensional and because we are like vibrating, it's like there's this merger place where literally at this point, John and I are always together. And he explained it to me the other day, because sometimes I'm very deliberate about it and other times it's casual. And I said, John, do you feel like I'm showing up, for this? And he said, think of it like this, Kath. He said, I've got you on, like most people down there have the TV on as background noise. You're always my background noise. I never miss one of the stupid things you do. I never miss the messing around that you and Arthur are doing, joking around. He said, I always leave when I know it's time to leave. But he said, I'm always there in an instant second. He said, I'm never gone, And I looked at Arthur and I said, God, sometimes I feel like a reality show for the other side.
Yeah.
But it's that palatable.
That's amazing.
Yes. And that's what I want to bring to people. I want to bring the people that are on the brink, that have had experiences that, you deny, you want to think they're real, or people who, they have unfinished stuff, I'm not getting over this. My father's been dead for 10 years. Okay, so let's bring him in. Let's meet at the veil with him. And so it's opening up a whole multidimensional perspective. And the other thing that's cool is that since I've been doing this work with John and I see the multidimensionality on that side, I see the multidimensionality of this side.
How so?
Therein lies the inner child work. The reason inner child work works is because when we do the meditations and when we go back and see that inner child or sense or feel, we're tuning into a vibrational impression, a vibrational signature of that child that's real in another dimension of time. So who we are today can go back to that child and say, I'm the one you've been waiting for. I can give you what you need, and I'm going to bring you here. So what the work is that John and I are doing now is people come to me, they want to contact a loved one. There are loved ones over there that really want us to use their love and our love for them to bridge through stuff that we would never confront otherwise. You know, they're believable. It doesn't take any trust to expand to an angel. I mean, how much karma do we have with an angel? But with people that we walked on the earth with, we've got karma.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you see this going somewhere beyond where you are right now? Or are you just going to be surprised by the rest of your very fascinating
I continue
life?
to be surprised. I asked for, at least 6 months after I pushed the button to publish a book, and 48 hours later, my husband and I were diagnosed with COVID. So that took me down a rabbit hole. And then 3 weeks later, I had to put my beloved Avery down, my pet of 12 years. But that's even led me into the sequel. So everything in the sequel is, I don't know what's next, but I know that it's the next step.
Yeah.
And I know that it's just the beginning for those of us who want to connect with loved ones and don't have a background in being psychic. I mean, I'm not clairvoyant, I'm clairsentient. Just the other day I was meditating and they explained to me how I work. And how I work is what they called, I'm a multidimensional empath.
That's a lot of empathing.
And what works is that somebody will come to me and I'll say, okay, what's your concern? Okay, so just start talking to me. And I'll just kind of be listening, And there's a certain point. It reminds me of the movie Top Gun, where they'd get the MiG and they'd have it and they'd be in contact. And sometimes right in the middle of a sentence, they'll say, okay, I know where we got to go. It's like, it's not the story I'm listening to. I'm getting the vibrational frequency. And what's going on in the subconscious that I never knew is I'm scanning my Akashic record for a place in my soul's history where I experienced that. And the minute that clicks, I don't know my story, but I have the vibrational energy and I know how to get them out of there.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think your life story should be, there is always a sequel.
Yes.
Because I think
to be continued is how the book ends.
Right.
To be continued.